Another episode of the Flip Talk podcast. My name is Don Costa. I am your host. I have my guest here, Kyle Stanley. We're going to be talking Airbnbs. Before I get into that and before I let Kyle even speak, I'm going to do some business here. So we got a lot of cool things going on with Flip Talk and the Flip Talk community. We're doing the mastermind 4 times a year, looking to build people into what they want to be and what they deserve to be at in the Inner Circle Elite Mastermind. So go to beinthisroom.com if you're interested in being part of that community. And just yesterday, for those of you who are listening to this on iTunes and Stitcher, you'll miss the window on this. So you got to be making sure that you're liking the Flip Talk page with Don Costa, because this is something that will literally have cut off by the time this airs. But for those of you watching live, I announced yesterday that we are doing the Rookie Playbook course. We're taking people through a 12-week live coaching, basically, where we're getting on and interacting with you on Zoom once a week. We are dropping videos on a regular basis. We're giving away documents and all kinds of stuff. You're going to have more access to me than anybody will have probably ever again for the next 3 months. And then you'll have free access to our Facebook group and any other content we put out for the Rookie Playbook for eternity, which will never happen again. And that is at rookieplaybook.com. You can go, there's not a sales page. There's a simple order form. I'm going to tell you right now, this introductory price is there for you. It'll never be there again. Go check it out if you want to be part of the community. I'm going to pour my heart and soul into this first round, the first round drafts. So with all the business aside, I want to introduce my guest, Kyle Stanley. How you doing, buddy?
Good, Don. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, I appreciate it. So we're going to talk Airbnb. You are the fearless flipper. You got the the sign right there behind you for those of you watching live. So tell me about your real estate journey. Like why did you get into it? What is it you wanted and that drove you into the direction of real estate investing?
Yeah, it's funny, right? It's called fearless flipping. Everyone thinks now it's about flipping. That's really where it started. It was like, all right, I'm getting in this flipping thing. I'm going to do this. And then I realized, wait, I've been kind of doing this whole real estate thing for like 5 years without actually really being a real estate investor by doing Airbnb. So, long story short, I guess my real estate career started without me even really knowing. When I bought my first house and started house hacking, didn't even know what house hacking was. But I was doing 2 roommates in 2 of my vacant rooms. Then I had another vacant room where I was doing Airbnb, where, like, to start off, I was scared, like terrified about this Airbnb thing. But my friend told me about it, and he was like, hey, I made $7,000 in the last 5 months renting out a room in my apartment in Vegas. And I was like, okay, I'm in Scottsdale. Like, Vegas and Scottsdale, they seem pretty similar in terms of bringing a ton of people. So I might as well try it. And so since 2015, when I started that journey, I can proudly say I've never paid $1 for rent, never paid $1 for a mortgage, because I've just always been able to house hack my way through roommates and through Airbnb to not have to pay. And then I made this decision in January of 2019 after going to a Fortune Builders event that I was going to, take the dive into real estate investing and start flipping houses. In my first year, everything went great. Flipped 3 houses, bird 1, and then had a wholesale deal. So I was really excited about that. But it was that decision in 2019 that made me just kind of open my eyes. And I realized right around like March or April that I was like, wait, like this Airbnb thing, like maybe I could do something with that too. And so long story short, fast forward, I educated myself. I took courses. I got a mentor on my side, and within 5 short months, I went from $1,000 a month on average with Airbnb to $15,000 a month. And that was just with 5 listings here in Fresno, California, which, like Don, you and I talked about, it's like, why are people coming to Fresno? Right.
Right.
And so that made me a believer. And now today we've got 9 listings. We're on track this month to gross just over $23,000. And this is a slow month still in Airbnb in Fresno. So I'm excited for the summers to come. But this is also the cool thing for me is this has become almost completely passive. I say almost because I still put in a couple hours a week, but that's not bad for a business that will bring in that much income. So I'm pretty excited.
Yeah, that's cool. So, and that's one of the things that I failed to mention when I introed you. You're actually in the exact same market I am. You're in Fresno, and we just recently met in person at a meetup, and got to know you, and you're a cool guy and got a lot of cool things going on. So, the Airbnb thing. So, that is something that I've kind of watched for a while, something I've had some interest in, and really kind of wanted to check out more, I think. So this is going to be an interview where I'm probably going to grill you a little bit more than you're used to.
Let's do it.
So when you can, if you don't mind me asking, so $22,000 gross. I don't want to peel that back, too much on you, but like, what do you walk away with on that? Because you obviously have the cost of the property, the rents and cleaning and upkeep and all that kind of stuff like that. So what the percentage of that you can expect to net from your income, I guess, on average, what does that usually look like?
Yeah. So for that right now, what I can tell you is that there's 3 different ways that we're running our Airbnbs, and that really determines the amount of net that we're getting from that.
Okay.
So I can tell you this month, we're probably going to net somewhere around 9 to 10,000, which is
Perfect.
awesome. But there's a combination there. So just to like give a little bit of background, I own some of them, but the majority I don't own. And so there's 2 different forms of ways to manage an Airbnb for places that you don't even own. One's called rental arbitrage, which is becoming kind of a hot word in the Airbnb space. Essentially, I go to landlords like Don, you have a lot of properties where I can say, hey, Don, I've got an opportunity to be your best tenant. I'm going to basically have it cleaned every single time there's a new guest in here. If there's any repairs, we're going to take care of it. I've got my own team. You're not even going to hear from me. And I'm going to pay rent early. I'm going to be really covered by $1 million of insurance. And so I'm going to be your best tenant. And so a lot of landlords will say, that sounds awesome, and let me take over as a renter, but then sublease it through Airbnb, and I take the profit off of that. So long story short, if I gross $3,000 and my rent is $1,400, and let's just call it another $500 of expenses, well, I'm paying $1,900, but then I'm keeping that extra $1,100 of profit in my pocket. So that's one way. But then the other way would be like, if Don, you came to me and said, hey, I'm cash flowing $200, $300 a property, and I'd rather be around like $700 or $800 per property. You could hire me to be a co-host, to be a manager of your property or properties. And basically I just run it for you. And then you get paid, and basically it's a completely passive investment. But the only difference is that you front all the money for furniture, for repairs, just like a regular property management company. I come in as a manager to manage that property, but you get higher cash flow. So those are the different ways that we're running it. And based on whichever level that we're at, is what we're making per property.
Okay, very cool. So 5 in Fresno. Again, the question is for people who are in smaller areas, like I remember a flight coming back from, I think it was Canada or something, years and years ago. My kids were really little. And the steward on the flight was like, for those of you who live here, welcome home. For those of you who are visiting, you're like, why? Like, why? What's the point? And Fresno gets beat up a lot, and, so I will say Fresno is a great city, and there's Yosemite, and there's a lot of reasons to come here. But when you're in the mindset of, well, my city's not like a New York or a San Francisco, is it worth Airbnb-ing? Like, what would you tell somebody that has that kind of question, right?
Yeah, honestly, it's all data driven. Like you can't use your gut on this thing. I started in Scottsdale. I moved back to Fresno in 2016 when my dad was diagnosed with bone cancer. And it was one of those things where it was like, it was a no brainer. I had to move back home, but I was like, oh, this is, kind of on a business standpoint, this is kind of a bummer, because here I was paying free rent or free mortgage because I was Airbnb and house hacking, and now I'm moving back, and now I'm going to have a mortgage. But hey, for kicks and giggles, let's just throw this thing on Airbnb. And it was getting booked more in Fresno than it was in Scottsdale. And I was like, what? And so today, back then there wasn't any data that I could look at. Today, there's an awesome website called AirDNA, where you can literally just pay for a membership and see it grades your city. It shows you the rental demand. It shows you the average revenue, the average occupancy. And Fresno is one of the best when it comes to data, 81% occupied. And these high and low seasons, they just don't happen, because I break it down to Fresno is a need market versus a want market. It's not a Newport Beach where people are coming in from all over the nation to, go take a vacation getaway. They're coming into Fresno for really reasons for family, for business, or because they're like, hey, I want to go to Yosemite. I want to go to LA, San Francisco, but I don't want to pay the crazy rates over there. Right. And I want to just come into like a little central hub and be able to drive to all those other things. So finding a market like that, like we just located with one of my new clients, Midland, Texas is actually a really good market for the same reason. Tons of business people coming in, and it's in the middle of a lot of things. Whereas like you wouldn't think, hey, I'm going to go take a vacation in Midland, Texas. That's not the need. Or that's not the desire in Midland. It's a need where they need to be close to something and pay low rates.
Okay. Very cool. So before I get into best practices, I know that one of my fears with doing Airbnb, years ago, I was looking at it as an opportunity, and cities were cracking down and on short-term rentals, right? And so what you're in it, what do you see, with that? Because I know like even Fresno, it either passed or they're trying to pass an ordinance right now that you have to get like a special business license to be an Airbnb operator, because they've had issues, right? Some communities have had issues with people just running the Airbnbs to party, which we'll get into best practices in a minute. But what's your thoughts on municipalities cracking down and outline them all together, or trying to make it a little harder to operate them?
Well, there's two sides. If you're going to build an Airbnb business, you need to be very mindful of this. But if you're just looking to do Airbnb as like a house hacking way, or if it's your primary residence and you're thinking, hey, we go out of town like 3 months out of the year, let's Airbnb it while we're gone, it's really not going to affect you, because all of these ordinances that are being placed, like Vegas, for example, they did it because they get so much money from their casinos that if they drove away a lot of business for the casinos, they would obviously get hit really hard. So what they did is they said it has to be owner occupied, meaning that you live there for X amount of days during the year, or that you actually live there right now and you're just renting out a room or renting out an extra unit on the property. So those people will never really be hurt by it. But if you are wanting to build a business, the number one thing that I would look for is, does your city have regulations that protect the landlords or protect the manager that is going to be doing Airbnb? So a lot of people say, oh no, Fresno is getting either permits or a business license. Again, it's not really like certain what exactly they're getting, but I think it's going to push away a lot of people that don't really understand the Airbnb model. And the people that are just kind of doing this half-assed and kind of like, oh, it's just a hobby for me, I think it's going to push them away versus like me. I'm excited about that because what I see from that is Fresno is saying, hey, we see what you're doing and we're okay with it, but we just want it to be legit. And so another thing is like in Newport Beach, I brought that one up earlier, but I've got a really good friend of mine who has a $4 million business in Airbnb in Newport Beach, where he just does rental arbitrage. He doesn't own a single property. And he's going in there and he's basically, again, having to pay the city to rent this thing out. So the city of Newport Beach is never going to shut that down because they're getting paid millions of dollars every single year to allow these short-term rentals to happen, and through permits getting paid by the city.
Okay, very cool. So then best practices and that kind of thing. So let's start with setting up an Airbnb. Get my words out this morning. So you want to do this thing and you've never done it before. What's some of the first steps you should take to moving forward on Airbnb?
Well, the first thing you got to do is educate yourself and really understand, the majority of people that are listening to this podcast that are interested in real estate investing, maybe you have properties right now that you're kind of like thinking, hey, maybe I should turn this one into an Airbnb. But the majority of people are like, hey, I've only got $10,000, $15,000 to my name. I can't even afford a property. And I'm not really finding much traction and finding deals where I can, use other people's money. Well, educate yourself and learn how to be an Airbnb rental arbitrage expert, where you learn how to talk to landlords, take over their properties, and then sublet it on Airbnb. That to me is the lowest risk way of getting into something like this, because again, you don't own the property. Let's say that you buy a property tomorrow, excuse me, and you end up saying, oh my gosh, I got into a bad deal. Well, you're stuck to that property. Well, if you sublet through Airbnb, you rental arbitrage, and you realize, oh my gosh, I got a bad deal. What are you out? You're out the money that you paid for the furniture, and then you're out anything that you have to do to break your lease early. And so that's a really low risk way of getting in and not really sacrificing much. But yeah, if you end up getting your first Airbnb and you lock it down, the best thing I can say is just really understand like your market and understanding exactly where you should be having your Airbnb. Location matters, just like anything in real estate. Location really matters. And I hate to see people think, oh yeah, I'm just going to go out and I'm going to get my first Airbnb. And then before they know it, they're like, oh wait, there's regulations and this is outlawed, or oh wait, this place isn't really desired. There's no one that's actually coming into town. So really doing your research beforehand to see if it's even a legit place, I think is very, very important.
Okay. Best practices for operating,
Yeah.
what's like screening clients, that kind of stuff. Like, how do you keep from having, kids rent the place to party, which is one of the issues I think Fresno ran into, right? And the neighbors were
Yeah.
complaining about that. So how do you get around that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, first of all, you can never control everything.
Right.
So the best thing I would say is just get in the mindset that stuff is going to happen. You're going to have people come in that say, I had a client recently who said, they had a request from someone that said, hey, I'm coming into town to see my dad. He's got cancer, playing the sob story. And then on the Ring doorbell, because he's got it monitored, he sees a woman who looks like she's on something, she's stumbling around. And before he knows it, there's like three different men that are coming in and leaving, coming in and leaving. And it was like, what's going on here? And you can kind of use your imagination to figure out what was going on. But, he learned a lesson there that basically taught him, hey, I accepted someone with 0 reviews who lives here locally. And so we have a really strict no locals with 0 reviews policy, to where that was 90% of our issues. And I don't know if that's a Fresno thing, but most of the time I hear from people in other markets that, yeah, they really crack down and make sure that they do not allow people locally who have 0 reviews. Now, if you're local and you got 5-star reviews, I'm going to take you all day long. But that would be the biggest thing, is just eliminating any sort of issues there, because those are usually the people that are just like, hey, it's tough for me to find privacy and I want to have a party of 10 people, or 20 people or 100 people. So I'm going to just use an Airbnb. That would be my biggest suggestion for pre-screening.
How important are the reviews?
Very. I mean, just like anything, Don, right? If I'm looking for a podcast on real estate, am I going to pick the 5-star Flip Talk podcast, or am I going to pick the 4.1 star, whatever guy doing it out of his garage?
Right.
So reviews are really important. But one of the things I will say, this is a good teaching point, is don't get emotionally attached to these reviews. So many people are like, oh, it's my house and I put my heart and soul into this thing. And someone just gave me 3 stars because they didn't like, the kitchenware. And it's like, you're just not going to make everyone happy. So you just like I said, with getting used to the fact that stuff is going to happen, you need to get used to the fact that not everyone is going to love your place like you do. So if you get a 4-star review instead of 5, don't go hunting down the person and wondering why you didn't get a 5-star review. If you got a 1-star review, see what it was, put it up as a claim with Airbnb, see if you can get it taken off. But at the end of the day, if you're having a consistent flow of people coming into your property, you're treating them well, and you've got mostly 5-star reviews, those 1, 2, 3, 4-star reviews that happen very rarely are not going to hurt you very much.
Very cool. So I got basically one more question for you, I think, here. Why would somebody want to Airbnb and not just rent the property? When you rent the property, you have consistent renter every single month for the most part, right? Obviously, if you got a good renter, but when you Airbnb, you're constantly relying on bookings. So why do that?
If I'm the one that is the landlord, or
do you own the property or whatever? Like, why do Airbnb versus just renting it? Like, I'm looking for, like, what's the difference in income?
Yeah, there you go. Okay. Well, I mean, basically sometimes as much as 3 to 5 times the income. So what you're looking at is whatever your mortgage is, you want a 2.5x or 3x that mortgage. So that's what on average we see with Airbnb. So if my mortgage is 1,100, I'm usually bringing in anywhere between 3,000 to 3,500 gross income. After all my expenses, my net is almost always at least $1,000. So that was really why I got into Airbnb. Is I got into real estate. I got excited about this whole thing of flipping. And then I was like, man, this idea of needing to get so many properties and having to have 100 properties just to cash flow, $15,000 to $20,000 of passive income. that's a lot of properties. And so I'm always the person that's like, how can I get there faster? And with Airbnb, if I can cash flow $1,000 per property, and even on a bad month, I mean, I'll be honest, I'll share some bad months here. My worst month with a house that I own, I still cash flowed $400. And that's more than most people are cash flowing for their regular long-term rentals. The other thing I love about it is if you have a tenant, a long-term tenant, Don, when's the last time that you actually went and visited one of your long-term rentals and met with one of the tenants?
No, I don't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, or even if you have a team, how often are they doing it? Maybe once or twice a year. And so, tenant ends their lease and they leave, and okay, you've got a $500 security deposit from them, but there's $4,000 or $5,000 worth of damage that you didn't even know about until they moved out. And with Airbnb on the other side, I have cleaners that are going in every single time that a guest leaves. And because of that, I know if there's a hole in the wall. I know if there's granite that's been chipped. I know if a fence has been ripped down, anything like that. And Airbnb has my back. So I file a claim. If the guest doesn't pay it, Airbnb pays it. And I mean, just a really good example is one time I had a ton of cleaning that a cleaner had to do. And then a door was broken and it was about a $500 bill to me. I sent it off to Airbnb. They paid it. So I get a brand new door and I don't have any debt from the cleaner. And so everything's covered. So basically you have an insurance policy that's going to make sure that your house is in great condition no matter what happens.
Very cool. All right. Anything that I didn't ask you feel like we need to share?
Man, I just think that there's so much buzz around Airbnb right now that it's really easy, just like anything, to get into something and think that, oh, I can just easily throw up a listing and I'll make a ton of money. And sometimes it is as easy as that, but really educate yourself, do the numbers. I've got a really awesome calculator, and I don't know if you're going to have show notes, but I would definitely throw it in there. fearlessflipping.com, right there on the homepage. We've got an Airbnb calculator that you can literally just plug in all the numbers and it'll spit out exactly what you could possibly earn at the end of the month. And if you just download that, you do your research and you plug in the numbers, you're going to be a lot more, you're going to be set up for success. And so that would be what I would definitely suggest.
All right. Very cool. Well, tell everybody how to get a hold of you.
Yeah, a few different ways. You can just go to fearlessflipping.com. I would also go to our Airbnb host page, which is just fearlessflipping.com/Airbnb host. On there, it's just got a ton of tips and ways to connect with me. And then we're on Instagram, fearlessflipping316.
All right. Perfect. Well, I appreciate having you on. Thank you.
Thank you, Don.